The war in the Middle East has brought foreign policy to the forefront of the Republican presidential primary. And Florida Governor Ron DeSantis has not only laid out how he would be handling the crisis if he were in the White House, but he's also using his current job to back America's top ally in the region. Since the fighting has begun, DeSantis says he has helped evacuate hundreds of American citizens from Israel and even sent healthcare supplies and military equipment to support Israeli forces. Joining us now is GOP presidential candidate Governor Ron DeSantis. Welcome to you, and good to have you on the program, Governor.
Appreciate being with you.
All right, so is all that the case? Have you done all of that as a state, as a governor, in support of Israel in this war?
Yeah, you know, when the attacks happened, I knew that this was going to impact Florida because we have a very strong relationship with Israel. There's a lot of affinities with our people and theirs, a lot of cross-pollination. We have a big Israeli-American population. And what we found after a day or two is that people were stranded. They weren't getting help from the State Department. They weren't getting help from the embassy there in Jerusalem. And so I did an executive order in Florida, and we were able to scramble planes and bring back mostly Floridians, but not all, because there were other Americans who were stranded. We're all Americans in this. So we ended up bringing back, rescuing over 700 people back to Florida. And my wife and I were there greeting the first plane that came by. 271 total people, but 91 children. And so that really brings it home that you had families with young children. I had one mother point to her, looked like about a 5 or 6 year old daughter, and say to me for the last 2 nights, she just kept saying, "Mommy, I can't have the rockets anymore. I need Florida. We got to get back to Florida." So we were able to help do that. And then when the planes went back to pick up more people, they were able to bring a lot of donated supplies, medical supplies, but also things that were donated like Kevlar and helmets and a whole bunch of things that can be useful as Israel defends itself in this war.
When I flew out of Israel a couple of weeks ago, Governor, I took an El Al flight to Miami. And the nature of the population there in South Florida really was driven home. A lot of people who were very happy to be going back to the United States. A lot of people very happy for our coverage of the war. But when it comes down to this idea of military equipment, your critics have said, well, wait a second, this is a job for the federal government. It's one thing to send Kevlar and helmets over there, but have you procured any weapons or ammunition to be sent over there?
So what we did, it was not anything that the state of Florida. So we had people in our state, private citizens, who wanted to purchase and donate that type of equipment, ammunition and weapons, and largely for the first responders who typically aren't armed, but given Hamas is attacking first responders. So they felt that there was a need. Now, we did not make that transport, but we worked with actually El Al and was able to get that stuff over. But that was not anything that Florida had. Those were all donated pieces of equipment where philanthropists purchased and, you know, probably put a lot of money out for that. And then we helped engineer the transport, but we didn't actually transport it ourselves.
Okay. What do you say to those who are accusing you? The head of the Democratic Party in your state, Nikki Fried, says you're an absentee governor. You're acting more like the commander-in-chief than the governor of Florida, saying Biden's the commander-in-chief of our military, not Ron DeSantis. That same person also saying this is a gross breach of norms and a potential violation of federal laws governing the shipment of weapons. What do you say to those criticisms?
Well, we had Floridians that were in distress. I looked to see all the hostages that are being held by Hamas. We know, of course, there are many Americans. Had we not acted when we did, there may be more Americans held hostage. We rescued people who were in distress. My job as governor is looked after the safety and welfare of people in this state. It just so happened that a very close ally of not only the United States but Florida was attacked viciously, and that left a lot of our people in a breach, and they were in a difficult spot. So I think leadership is, if there's a void, you step up and you fill the void. And so that's what we did. We did it very appropriately. Everything we did was working in concert with the government of Israel, and I know there are hundreds and hundreds of people that are in Florida now that are thankful that we stepped up and led.
Governor, as anti-Israeli sentiments, anti-Semitism, anti-American sentiments rise around the world, we're seeing a lot of activity there in the Middle East against American interests. The FBI director testifying before Congress earlier in the week said he is concerned that terrorism could raise its ugly head again on American shores. Listen to what he said.
We also cannot and do not discount the possibility that Hamas or another foreign terrorist organization may exploit the current conflict to conduct attacks here on our own soil.
We all know well the situation with the southern border and the fact that almost 2.5 million people came across it. 900,000 were released into the United States. Were all of these people on the special interest alien list? There's at least 500,000 gotaways. If you were president, what would you be doing about that threat that the FBI director just articulated?
I'd deport those people immediately. Do you not think that after these last 2.5 years, our enemies have not taken advantage of that border? Of course they have. We know people from the Middle East have poured in. You guys showed on a graphic I saw all the people on the terrorist watch list that have come in just in the last year is unbelievable. We would have never allowed that, say, in the aftermath of 9/11. You have Iranians have come, Russia, China, all of that has happened. So I would be very aggressive at sending people back, obviously stopping the invasion further, but it is a threat to terrorism, what's happened there. What I'd also say, though, and you pointed out some of these demonstrations, you know, I joke, I'm one of the few people that got through Harvard and Yale and came out more conservative than when I went in because they're known to be very left-wing. But even back in that day, I don't think a lot of students would have, in the aftermath of an attack, when the blood wasn't even dry on Israeli citizens, gone out and celebrated that. And yet we've seen that at some of the most august institutions in this country. So there's a sickness that's in these institutions. I've said any foreign student on a visa who's making common cause with Hamas, I'd cancel the visa and I'd send them home. But we also have to look inside about how it got to this point in this country where you can go out there and proudly advocate for effectively a second Holocaust. It's totally unacceptable.
Governor, I want to check in on the campaigns, ask you how things are going. As an NBC News headline reads, Trump is aiming to take over DeSantis' base of power in the Florida GOP. It writes about the Republican Party in your state that you built is now turning Donald Trump's way. This is your Republican colleague in the Senate in Florida, Rick Scott. He says this: I know most of the candidates running for president. Make no mistake, every single one of them would be a better president than Joe Biden. But Republican voters are making their voices heard loud and clear. They want to return to the leadership of Donald Trump. To that, you say what?
I must have missed where those voters have actually voted yet. Isn't it odd that we haven't had one contest and there's people that are having a rush to try to short circuit the people's voice? So the people haven't been able to speak. That's one of the reasons why we're here in Iowa. I'm now in my 85th county out of 99. I'm going to be the only candidate that does all 99 counties. I think it's important that you show up, you ask for the vote, and you tell them what you're going to do. And I can tell you, obviously the former president has support, but there's a lot of people that haven't made up their mind. There's people that are leaning to him now who have not made a final decision. And so you're going to start to see, as we get in the next couple months and into the new year, you're going to start to see people make some decisions about, okay, what's the pathway for the Republican Party going forward? And with me, they get somebody who will fight for them, which is important, but will also win the election, but win the fights, and then lead this country to a comeback. That's what we did in Florida. We were able to create huge success. We're continuing to do that. They just had the figures this week. We led again in net in-migration in 2022. Massive numbers of people are flocking because of what we've been able to do. That's the type of leadership that can work nationally. That's the type of model Republicans need to gravitate towards if we want to win.
I know that you're almost complete, Governor, the full Grassley tour of all 99 counties there in Iowa. But if we take a look at the latest Des Moines Register poll, Trump is still 27 points ahead at 43. You are now tied with Nikki Haley at 16. The next contest, New Hampshire, Trump is ahead 30. He's at 49. Haley's at 19. You're at 10. Then South Carolina, Trump is ahead by 31 points, 53. Haley's at 22. You're at 11. I know that nobody's voted yet in these first contests, but that ground rush, as you know, if you've ever jumped out of an airplane, is coming up fast toward that first Iowa caucus. Time is running out here.
Well, you've looked at the Iowa caucus polls the last few times. Whoever was winning right now in those polls did not actually win the Iowa caucus. And so this thing is very dynamic. It's just getting underway where people are starting to pay attention. Look, I think, Donald Trump's the most famous person in politics. I mean, so he has a great name ID, gets a lot of media coverage. As a default, you can understand that. But there's a lot of voters that are up for grabs, and we're going to make it happen. And the hard work we've put in going to these, a lot of them rural counties, that's not something that will necessarily show up in polls. That's something that shows up on caucus night when people bring their friends and family and come out and are willing to go through very cold temperatures, to stand for what, 2-3 hours potentially through a caucus and listen to the speeches and do all that. So that's what we're doing. We're doing what it takes to win. And we're going to get the job done, notwithstanding whatever polls this far out would say.
All right, Governor, we'll let you get back to what you're doing. But just final question. I mean, when you look at that lead still that Donald Trump does have in these polls, I mean, when people look at you and say, I mean, what is a realistic pathway for you to become the nominee? What is it? What's going to change in the next few months? How do you do it?
Well, look, if you want to take that one poll, which, we see it a little bit different than that, but that poll said that I have the highest percentage of Iowans that would consider voting for me, even higher than Trump, and that I have the highest favorability on net of anybody running, including Donald Trump. So that's a big reservoir of goodwill that we can pull from by working to make the case about why we should be the 47th president of the United States. These things are dynamic. I get that there has definitely been an interest in a narrative saying that people shouldn't even be able to vote and fold up to 10. I think that's totally off base. And I think people in these early states think that's off base as well.
All right. Well, favorability does reflect intensity, and intensity is what it's all about. Governor, thanks for joining us. Really
Thank you,
appreciate
Governor.
it.
Appreciate it.
All right.
All right. See you again soon.